So it's kind of crazy to think about it, but I've had my Quad Cortex now for over 2 years. In this video, I want to give a long-term update on the Quad Cortex, talk about things that I both like about it and don't like about it, and also give a general board update in terms of the setup that I'm currently using now and how the Quad Cortex integrates into that. So to begin, I want to talk about some of the things that I've really enjoyed about using the Quad Cortex over the past couple of years. Now, with the exception of about a couple of months, it's pretty much been on my board non-stop. I did have a period of time where I wanted to try a little bit of a different setup and use an amp a little bit more, so I actually switched to an HX Stomp, and I kind of like that setup, but I found after a while that I missed the screen of the Quad Cortex and I missed a little bit of the routing capabilities that the Quad Cortex offered over the HX Stomp. So I put the Quad Cortex back onto now a bigger board and have incorporated it with a bunch of outboard pedals, and I'll talk about that a little bit further in the video. But for now, some of the things, the first thing obviously is how it sounds, and I think this unit sounds so good. I've had so many compliments on my tone, and yeah, I have tried a few different amplifiers, but I generally keep coming back to the Tone King amp model that Neural DSP put in a couple of updates ago. I think as of this filming of the video, we're at 3.0.1. I think the 0.0.1 was maybe a bug revision with the plugin compatibility. But as of the filming of this video, that's the update that we're currently on. And you can find the Tone King amplifier in the Neural Captures folder from the factory captures. And that's the one I've been using pretty much for at least the past year. I think that it's been in the unit. Before that, I was using an Amalgam Audio Tone King capture, and that one's still good too. I just have basically stuck with the one that's been built into the unit. I've been super happy. In fact, I was so happy with how it sounded that I went out and I bought the exact Tone King Imperial Mark II amplifier that that capture is modeled after, and that's what I use downtown. I actually moved to Nashville beginning of this year from Canada, and that's basically where most of my work is coming from now, is in Nashville, and I'm Nashville based. So it's been kind of an adjustment from a lot of standpoints, and that's why my videos haven't been as frequent as they maybe were in the past. But getting back to the Quad Cortex, I've been really enjoying it for the most part. And yeah, the first and biggest praise I have for the unit is it sounds so good. I don't know all the ins and outs of the audio specs and that kind of thing. I just know that it sounds really good. And from a guy who isn't super technical about tweaking everything and making everything sound as close to the record as it possibly can, I find it's super easy to dial in a tone, and it's super easy to just get going and focus on your playing as opposed to tweaking sounds. So that's one of the main things that I've really enjoyed about using the Quad Cortex. Second on the list of things that I've enjoyed has been the user interface. Now, it's been praised on a lot of different forums and stuff like that, how easy it is to just drag and drop different blocks into the grid, and there's been different units now, like the Fender Tone Master Pro and stuff like that, that have kind of incorporated a similar idea. I believe it probably all stemmed from the Helix, although the Helix doesn't have a touchscreen, but it's got this pretty much the same type of look to it, and there's a grid and you can drag and drop your pedals and amps and cabs basically wherever you want in your signal chain, and you can make a signal chain that basically couldn't exist in the real world. In terms of putting, if you want to put a pedal between the amplifier and the speaker, generally you can't do that. So that's kind of another cool thing that you're able to do with a modeler such as the Quad Cortex, and that's something, the flexibility that that gives you, I find is super beneficial, and it kind of inspires you in a way because it forces you to be a little bit more creative. If something isn't sounding exactly right, you can drag and drop whatever it is that you're trying to fit into your chain wherever you want in the lineup, and you can see how it changes the sound. The third thing that I'm going to talk about actually is a little bit controversial from my perspective because I've had issues with my Quad Cortex, but that is reliability. Now, early on, maybe about a year into my Quad Cortex ownership, I had to send the unit away to be repaired. Basically, from what I understand, there was a problem with the audio board and it failed. I've got a video on my channel about that, and you can check that out and how it was resolved. And since then, I've had no issues. I've had the thing baking in the heat. I've had it, it's unfortunately gotten kind of damp in certain shows, outdoor shows that I've been playing. It's been in a wide variety of conditions, and I've honestly had no issues in terms of reliability. I don't think about the fact that it failed on me once. I chalk it up to a bad batch of boards, say that 10 times fast, and I've just been really happy with the reliability of the unit. I throw the pedal board and the soft case into the back of a trailer, and I'm pretty careless with it. I know there's lots of people that put skins and protectors over their quad cortex, and that's just not really been my thing. I take care of my stuff, but I don't baby it, because at the end of the day, I'm stepping on it with my feet, and I want to be able to, to a certain extent, I want to be able to test whether it's going to be reliable long term, and that's kind of a way. I don't go out of my way to abuse it, but I'm subjecting it to the conditions that I need it to work in, and to that point, it's been very reliable in that aspect. And the last thing on my list of things I'm really enjoying about the Quad Cortex definitely has to be the versatility. You have the fact that you can go out and purchase third-party captures of amplifiers that you basically can't find anymore, really rare amps that are super expensive that I personally would never really want to own. And the fact that, yeah, you have the built-in amps that come in the updates and stuff, and they're good, but you can have this whole rich third-party side of things that takes the whole experience to another level. And I think that with the Quad Cortex, and certainly the Tone X as well, you get a really good benefit from having this third-party database. Companies like Amalgam Audio, as I've discussed previously, that make really good high-quality captures, and that's basically one of the main things they do, is make high-quality captures for these modeling units. So you have the versatility of that. You have the social aspect where you can share your captures and share your signal chains with other users and kind of copy some of the stuff that other people are doing. And so it just makes for a really well-rounded package from that aspect. If you look at companies like Fractal and Line 6, they have just basically what's given to you in updates and built into the unit to begin with. You don't have the third-party aspects of it where you can buy and download amplifiers and stuff to add into the unit. And for some people that's great, but I think for my use case, it's been cool with a bunch of other people that I know that have the Quad Cortex modelers, where we can share amplifiers and we can share signal chains. And there's just that aspect of it where if there's a lot of people on the same modeler, there's just kind of an overlap, and you can learn from other people that way. And so that's been an aspect that I've really enjoyed about using the Quad Cortex over the 2 years, and it's only getting better, especially with the plug-in compatibility. And that's honestly something I haven't gotten into as of yet. But with the plug-in compatibility, you're supposedly going to be able to essentially copy whatever plug-in parameters you have on your computer and have it on the Quad Cortex. Alright, so now I'm going to jump into a couple of things that I don't like about the Quad Cortex. Some of them are more of a software thing, and some of them may be a hardware thing, I'm not really sure. But I'm going to start with my issues with using the effects loops. Specifically, effects loop number 2. Now, this has been documented in the forums a little bit, and I've heard that other people have had the same issues, and I myself have wrestled with it. So, on my board right now, I'll show you. I've got an outboard reverb. I have the Strymon Blue Sky, and I really like that reverb. I'm using it because essentially I purchased it when I was using an HX Stomp setup, but obviously I'm back to the Quad Cortex, and I stuck with this reverb. I really, really like the spring reverb and how it sounds, and it's just nice to have an external pedal that I can, adjust things on the fly. That's also why I have a Greer Lightspeed and a Wampler Tumnus as well on my board, as well as a compressor. The Wampler Ego compressor has kind of been my thing for a long time, and I got away from it when I first got the Quad Cortex, and obviously it's back on my board now. I just find it adds something. But with the effects loops in particular, I have the Blue Sky into effects loop number 2, and in the Quad, when I'm using that effects loop number 2 specifically, I find that there is like a weird distorting or crackling type of noise that I'm getting, and in order to remedy that, I basically have to take the send of the effects loop down. I think I have it minus 4.5 dB, and then the return side I boost it again. And I don't know if it's because it's sending too much signal into the blue sky and then it's distorting on that side of things. I don't think there's been a real fix for it. It seems maybe like a weird software issue. There's nothing that's indicating that anything is clipping if you look through the inputs and outputs on the quad. But that's just one thing that I've noticed that other people have also commented on and had issues with their quad cortex, and that's specific to effects loop number 2. So that's something that I hope that they'll fix. And I don't know if it's a software thing or if it's a hardware thing, but it definitely needs to be addressed. It's definitely noticeable for me more so when I use a real amplifier with the quad versus using the built-in captures and amplifiers that are on the unit. Now, maybe about a month ago, as of the filming of this video, they released the Nano Cortex. And while that's a cool product, I was really hoping that they would use some more resources to deal with some of the issues of the quad cortex, specifically functionality issues like not being able to long press on a foot switch or double press on a foot switch to do anything. It really limits the unit, especially since the foot switches are so close together. I think that if some of the engineering talent that went into the Nano Cortex was utilized in a different way, they could have probably created that functionality fairly easy. Now, obviously, I'm not a programmer, but it's something that's been requested for a very long time. That is additional functionality in the foot switches. All the main competitors have that. Fractal, Line 6, Kemper has a couple different options in that respect as far as I'm aware as well. And it's something that I really hope that they fix and work on. It would add so much flexibility to the quad, and it would make it just a lot more usable live. There's been a lot of guys on the forums that have basically said that they don't use the quad cortex live, and that's one of the big reasons why they don't. There's just not enough flexibility. You know, you're currently restricted to a scene mode, a stomp mode, a preset mode, or a hybrid combination of a couple of those different modes. And even when I normally have my stomps on the top and scenes on the bottom, but even in that, I'd still like to be able to have just a page of stomps or just a page of scenes, but still also have that hybrid combination. Like, why does it have to be one or the other, not both, kind of thing? I really hope that they start taking some of this user base a little bit more seriously. I know that they have a small team, and I do appreciate their efforts and what they have done with this, the new plugin compatibility. Now, for my particular use case, it's not something that I have even used at all yet. I don't own any of the plugins because the X plugins that they have released that will work on the quad cortex just haven't been ones that I've purchased. I'm kind of waiting more for the Tone King specifically, and maybe the Morgan amp suite to be released, and then I will maybe consider doing that side of things. It's cool that you can sidechain stuff now, and again, it's not really a functionality that I've taken advantage of in my setup as of yet, and it's probably just because I haven't really had much of a chance to play around with that. And obviously with the latest round of updates, they brought out stuff like the doubler, and that's cool as well. Again, for my use case, not super applicable in my everyday playing, but probably something that I will start messing with in the next little while. So I just want to talk briefly about how I have my board set up. So right now my whole setup is on a Temple Audio Duo 24. So I've got the quad cortex here, and then above it the Shure GLX-D 16 Plus. That's the newest guitar wireless pedal setup from Shure. I have a video of it on my channel if you want to check it out. Really happy with that. And then I have obviously the Wampler Ego compressor, the Strymon Blue Sky reverb, and then my drive pedals are the Greer Lightspeed and the Wampler Tumnus Deluxe. And then I have the Boss EV30 Dual Expression pedal. In terms of, I'll start with the expression pedal, I guess, because it's fairly quick, but I like the expression pedal. It's fine. If I was to do it over again, I would probably get the Dunlop DVP4 Mini, I think it's called. People just had a little bit better experiences with that, and I like that it's even a little bit smaller than the EV30. I bought the EV30 kind of on a whim, and doing it over again, I'd probably go with a Dunlop. Talking next, as I mentioned before, the Wampler Ego compressor, I have that actually before the input of the Quad Cortex. So it basically goes out of the wireless unit into the Wampler and then into the Quad Cortex. And then the Blue Sky is in Effects Loop 2 and the drive pedals are both in Effects Loop 1. I have the Greer into the Tumnus Deluxe. And then I use a basically Effects Loop 1 is before the amplifier and Effects Loop 2 is before the reverbs or the delays rather, typically. The only thing that I find with the Blue Sky besides that weird Effects Loop 2 thing is I can't, with the way that my pedal board is currently set up, I can't do a stereo send to the Blue Sky. Now you're able to do stereo outputs and a stereo input on the Blue Sky, but because the effects loops, Effects Loop 2 for example is mono, I can't send a stereo signal into the Blue Sky. So depending on whether I want my setup to be stereo or mono, if I want it stereo, I'll put a stereo delay after the Blue Sky, but if I'm just running a mono setup, which is probably 90% of the time, I will have the reverb after the delays, and obviously the delays are coming from the Quad Cortex. So then everything is powered by the Chox DC7, and I also have the Crux. Here's kind of a shot of the back, excuse the spaghetti mess, but the Crux is what is powering the Quad Cortex, and I've been really happy with the setup for the most part. For the better part of 2 years, I was just basically running the Quad Cortex and the expression pedal and the wireless, and I didn't have any outboard pedals. But in the last probably 5 months now, I incorporated some pedals back into my setup, and that's just basically for simplicity in terms of it's easier to turn a knob physically on a pedal rather than going through a menu, especially when you're playing live. I can adjust things with my feet if I need be, and especially the Greer Lightspeed, I really like this pedal. I can get a lot of different sounds out of it just by turning the drive knob, and I find that flexibility is kind of nice. I have this kind of hybrid setup, if you will, where I still have some analog pedals and then everything gets fed into the Quad Cortex, and that's kind of the brain of my setup. Now when I run an amplifier, obviously I don't have a capture in place. It's basically just being used for effects, and I've had great success with that too. Again, I bought a Tone King Imperial Mark II as a result of liking the captures in the Quad Cortex so much, and I use that when I can use a real amp. I still like having a real amp behind me whenever possible, and I just like it moving air and how I can kind of have the guitar interact with the amplifier in that kind of a way. And it's something that I've gotten back into, all as a result of liking the sounds I've got out of the Quad Cortex. So there was a period of time this summer when I switched to a HX Stomp setup, and a big part of that was because I just wanted to try something different. I kind of got gas or gear acquisition syndrome that all of us guitar players seem to get, and it never goes away. And so I switched to an HX Stomp, and I used the same pedals, just basically replaced the Quad with the Stomp. And I did like that setup as well. I found in terms of like a compact board, that's like a really cool way to go. The Line 6 stuff is just so bulletproof. I never worried about it. Obviously, it's starting to show its age a little bit in terms of like the screen and how you interact with everything. There's no touch screen. It's just all knobs and buttons essentially. But that's kind of one thing that brought me back to the Quad, was just the user interface for sure. Having that big screen was really nice. And I found like I purchased a external MIDI Stomp pedal for the HX Stomp, and so that was another thing that I had to add on to my board. And there was just kind of a little compromise that I had to make because the Stomp is such a compact pedal. But that's been my basic journey with it. I think that going forward, I don't see myself making too many changes. Now I'm still using the Friedman ASC10 as my guitar cabinet most of the time. As I said, I use an amplifier whenever I'm basically able to, but if I want to plug in direct to front of house and still have a little bit of air moving, I'll honestly use that Friedman cab. I've got a video of it on my channel as well if you're interested in it. And that's probably going to be my setup for the next little while. I'm playing a lot, so I don't have a lot of time to revamp my board all the time, and you know, wiring up this board and shifting things around it gets to be a bit of a time suck. So for the foreseeable future, that's kind of how I'm going to use the setup. I use it for all my practicing. I use it for all my live stuff. It probably sees, I would say, at least 24 hours of use every week kind of thing as it sits right now. And I don't worry about it. It's, as I mentioned before, it's been a really solid unit with the exception of the one issue that I had, and that was a faulty board. Not much a guy can do about that. So thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing to the channel and do like the video, and we'll see you in the next one.